What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle's departure from Suits was a carefully polished lie? Imagine this, a global audience buying into the fairy tale version of events, believing she simply walked away to embrace love, marriage, and royalty, when in reality, deep within the corridors of Hollywood, a darker story was brewing. A story that Aaron Korsh, the man who created Suits and shaped its legacy, has kept locked inside for years. And now, at 58, he finally dares to whisper the truth. The truth? It isn't what Meghan or the palace ever wanted out in the open. Think about it. How often do you see producers remain silent about major cast exits? Usually, they issue polished statements, maybe even gushing tributes. But Korsh? He was different. His silence was deafening. And when silence lingers for so long, it usually hides something big. Why would a man who benefited enormously from Meghan's rise refuse to sing her praises? Why would he wait until now to speak? That's what makes this story so explosive. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Here's the unsettling claim. Meghan Markle allegedly used Suits as far more than a stepping stone into stardom. She allegedly used it as cover, as a passport into hidden worlds. Suits premieres, travel junkets, special events. All of these became more than TV obligations. They were, according to whispers that never quite died down, doorways into secret opportunities, yacht girl rumors, and controversial side deals that had nothing to do with television. And it was this very duplicity, Korsh suggests, that led to her abrupt removal from the show. Now, stop for a second and ask yourself, how does someone go from being a moderately successful TV actress to rubbing shoulders with royals, billionaires, and the world's most powerful elites seemingly overnight? Does that happen by accident? Or is there always a backstage pass, a behind-the-scenes network that no one dares talk about? That's where the curiosity builds. Because Meghan wasn't just a character on Suits. She was a character in her own story, scripting a narrative in plain sight while allegedly conducting a very different life behind the curtain. From the outside, it all looked perfect. Suits was the show that gave her relevance. Her face on billboards, her name climbing up credits, her character Rachel Zane adored by millions. Fans believed they were watching an underdog rise. A biracial actress carving her way into a tough industry. That's the fairy tale. That's the image. But what if that image was only half the truth? Aaron Korsh, the man behind Suits, didn't need Meghan to succeed. Suits was already a polished machine, delivering drama, wit, and characters audiences loved. Harvey Specter, Mike Ross, Donna Paulson. Suits was strong before Meghan, and it remained strong after. So why was Meghan's presence so delicate, so controversial, that Korsh would allegedly be forced into decisions he could barely admit until now? It starts with the rumors. Hollywood is a place of whispers, and anyone who has been on a set knows that stories travel faster than scripts. Meghan's whispers weren't about her acting. They were about her off-screen choices. Crew members talked. Extras noticed things. Certain requests she made seemed unusual. They weren't diva demands about makeup or trailers. They were stranger than that. Allegedly tied to where she wanted to be flown, who she wanted to be photographed with, and what she wanted her schedule to conveniently allow. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would an actress in a secondary role hold such unusual power over her schedule? Was it luck? Or was someone protecting her? And here's where it gets even darker. Yacht girl rumors. They sound sensational, even ridiculous, until you realize how many actresses, models, and rising names in Hollywood have been linked to that very world. A world of elite parties, luxury yachts, and wealthy power brokers who could make or break careers overnight. Did Meghan use Suits as the perfect camouflage? The perfect excuse to be in certain cities, to attend certain parties, without anyone questioning her? It's a chilling thought, isn't it? Aaron Korsh was watching all of this unfold. He wasn't just a producer. He was the gatekeeper. The one who had to answer to networks, sponsors, and studios. He saw the headlines Suits wanted and the rumors it didn't. He saw what was polished for press releases and what was whispered in private. For years, he said nothing. But silence doesn't erase the truth. And here's the question that haunts everything. Why is Korsh speaking now, at 58? Could it be that the story was too dangerous before? Meghan wasn't just an actress anymore. She became a duchess. She became untouchable, cloaked in royal protection. Who in their right mind would dare to expose her? to suggest that her exit from Suits wasn't a clean break, but a calculated one forced by circumstances no one wanted public. To even hint at yacht girl connections was enough to invite lawsuits, backlash, and silencing. So Korsh did the safest thing he could. He stayed quiet. Until now. But what makes his revelations matter in this moment? Meghan and Harry's empire is shaky. Their Hollywood partnerships are under scrutiny. Their deals with Netflix, Spotify, and publishers are collapsing or being questioned. The brand is no longer untouchable. And perhaps Korsh saw his moment, not to destroy Meghan, but to finally unburden himself of a truth that's been buried for too long. This matters because it forces us to re-examine not just Meghan's Hollywood past, but her entire trajectory. If Suits was more than a job, if it was a cover, then what else in her story isn't what it seems? What other parts of the fairy tale were crafted for public consumption, while something else entirely was happening in the shadows? And here's where it gets personal. For Aaron Korsh, this wasn't just about one actress. It was about his show, his reputation, his legacy. When the creator of a hit show finally admits that one of its breakout stars was removed not because of artistic direction or character development, but because of what she was doing outside the camera's gaze, that is a bombshell. Fans loved Rachel Zhang. They mourned her departure. They thought they knew why she left. But if Korsh is right, they were all deceived. The audience was sold a fairy tale when the reality was closer to scandal. So now you have to wonder, how deep does this go? Did Meghan orchestrate her exit? Or was she pushed out by forces bigger than herself? Forces determined to protect the brand of Suits at all costs? And if that's true, why would the same woman, years later, try to rebrand herself as a victim of the media, a misunderstood outsider, when her own show was allegedly covering up her double life? It's a paradox. It's a contradiction. And contradictions are where the truth often hides. Think of it like this. Suits was about lawyers, deception, and hidden motives. Isn't it ironic that one of its most famous actresses was allegedly living out the same themes in real life? Art imitating life, or life imitating art. As Korsh begins to tell his side, he forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that Meghan Markle's Suits career was never what we believed. That she didn't just use the fame to meet Prince Harry. She used it for connections that have nothing to do with love, nothing to do with acting, but everything to do with access, power, and influence. And if that's true, then Meghan's exit from Suits wasn't just an ending. It was a cover-up. A desperate attempt to close a chapter before it consumed the entire show. But here's the most shocking part. When Korsh finally began to hint at the truth, he revealed something no one expected. And what he exposed next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What did Aaron Korsh reveal that nobody expected? That Meghan's arrival on the Suits set wasn't just a casting choice. It was the beginning of a storm that would quietly split the production team down the middle. Think about it. How many times have we heard stories of Hollywood actresses walking onto sets and instantly shifting the balance of power? Sometimes it's because of talent, sometimes charisma. But with Meghan, according to whispers from insiders, it was something else entirely. It wasn't her acting that got people talking. It was the mystery that followed her, the carefully cultivated aura of someone who seemed to be playing a game far bigger than her role as Rachel Zhang. Ask yourself this. Why did crew members notice Meghan more than other supporting actors? Why were there rumors swirling about her personal life long before she became attached to Prince Harry? When other actresses in the cast kept their lives relatively low-key, Meghan's off-screen world was buzzing with intrigue. Coincidence? Or design? On set, she was professional. Lines delivered, wardrobe in place, charming smiles during interviews. But in the corners of production, quiet conversations began. Who was she meeting after hours? Why were her absences so carefully explained away? And why did it feel like Meghan had another script, one only she was reading from? In Hollywood, you often hear the phrase, "Not all cast members are equal." That was never truer than with Meghan. She wasn't the lead, yet somehow she was treated like one. She had leverage. She had pull. And nobody could quite figure out why. Some castmates admired her ambition. Others resented it. But behind that ambition was something unusual. Meghan knew the value of networking, of appearing in the right places at the right time. Unlike her co-stars, who were content with magazine spreads and late-night interviews, Meghan's calendar seemed to stretch into a different world. Fashion events, charity galas, private dinners. Events that weren't part of the Suits machine, but somehow intersected with it just enough to blur the lines. Now here's where the contradiction grows sharper. Suits was filmed in Toronto. It wasn't the beating heart of Hollywood. For most of the cast, that meant a quiet life outside the spotlight, at least while shooting. But for Meghan, Toronto became a stage. She made it a hub for appearances, connections, and opportunities that had nothing to do with filming. And producers noticed. Why? Because every appearance connected back to Suits. She wore the brand. She represented the show. Yet some appearances raised questions. Was Meghan there to promote Suits? Or to promote herself? That was the tightrope. And she walked it with confidence. Too much confidence. Insiders began to whisper about her relationships. The friendships with influential figures, the sudden invitations to yacht parties, the connections that seemed to leapfrog her past her peers. These weren't the typical perks of being a mid-tier actress. They were something else. Something bigger. And here's the irony. While her character Rachel Zane was written as an underdog, struggling to prove herself in a world of high-powered lawyers, Meghan in real life was playing a completely different game. One where she wasn't the underdog at all. She was the one pulling strings. But strings always tangle. And soon, the cast began to feel it. Some complained about her priorities. Others rolled their eyes at her absences. It wasn't about professionalism. Meghan showed up when she needed to. It was about trust. Did she belong to Suits? Or was Suits simply a platform for her own empire? Aaron Korsh wasn't blind. As producer, every decision mattered to him. And Meghan's presence began to feel like a risk. Imagine being in his position. Your show is thriving. Ratings are strong. Sponsors are happy. And then suddenly, whispers about one cast member's extracurricular life begin to overshadow the show itself. How long before those whispers turn into headlines? How long before the reputation of Suits is stained? And that's when the first odd request came. It wasn't about wardrobe. It wasn't about dialogue. It was about travel. Meghan wanted flexibility. Specific weekends. Certain days. Always aligning, insiders said, with private events that had nothing to do with Suits promotions. For most actors, such requests would be dismissed. But Meghan? Somehow she got what she wanted. Why? Was she threatening to walk? Was she leveraging connections we didn't see? Or was she simply untouchable for reasons no one dared explain? The crew joked about it, but Korsh wasn't laughing. This was a crack in the foundation. One actress steering her own course while tethered to a global show. For Korsh, that was dangerous. But for Meghan, it was opportunity. And the more she pushed, the more she got. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone felt it. Now imagine being her co-stars. Watching someone with fewer lines, less screen time, and smaller story arcs suddenly become the face the press wanted. The one paparazzi chased. The one getting side deals while everyone else kept their heads down. Resentment grew. The atmosphere shifted. Meghan had what others wanted, buzz. But that buzz came at a cost. Because one night, during an offset event, Meghan's name was linked to something that couldn't be ignored. A party, yes, but not the typical Suits after-party. This one involved people with influence, power, and reputations that Hollywood insiders knew all too well. And from that moment, the rumors stopped being whispers. They became discussions. Discussions Korsh couldn't ignore. And this was just the first domino. Because if one strange request raised eyebrows, what came after would set off alarm bells. And those alarms would change the future of Suits forever. What happens when the alarms go off and nobody can pretend not to hear them anymore? That's exactly what unfolded as Meghan Markle's time on Suits grew more complicated. One odd request might be brushed aside. Two could be explained away. But when the pattern repeated itself, over and over, the producers, the sponsors, and even the cast couldn't keep ignoring the storm brewing beneath the glossy surface. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Meghan wasn't acting like a supporting actress on a network drama. She was acting like the star of her own private empire. And in Hollywood, that kind of behavior gets noticed very quickly. Let me ask you, have you ever worked in a place where one person suddenly seems to play by different rules? Where they're allowed liberties no one else dares request? How does that change the atmosphere? Resentment builds. Trust erodes. And soon, the entire group starts asking questions. That's exactly what happened on the Suits set. Co-stars whispered. Crew members compared notes. Producers tried to maintain order, but the feeling was spreading. Meghan was operating on her own timeline. And every unexplained trip, every mysterious engagement, Every carefully curated public appearance made the tension thicker. Think about the optics. Meghan would film intense legal drama scenes by day, sharp suits, law office sets, scripted conflicts. Then, suddenly, she'd be gone for the weekend. A charity event here, a fashion gala there. Sometimes even trips that seemed oddly extravagant for a mid-level TV actress. Sure, suits gave her visibility. But these appearances? They looked like she was already in a completely different league. And people started asking, how? Because Suits wasn't Friends. It wasn't Grey's Anatomy. It was a successful cable drama, but not the type of show that turned its stars into household names overnight. For most of the cast, fame grew gradually. But Meghan seemed to bypass that slow climb. She jumped ahead. One season, she was just another cast member. The next, she was suddenly rubbing shoulders with elites, spotted on yachts, and strategically photographed at places that had nothing to do with Suits. Coincidence? Or something much more deliberate? Here's where the contradictions get sharp. On set, Meghan projected humility. Interviews painted her as grateful, hardworking, someone who had fought for her place. But off-set, insiders claimed she was curating a different narrative, one where she wasn't just an actress, but a social climber with a vision far beyond television. That contradiction didn't sit well with everyone. One co-star allegedly confided that Meghan had two faces, the professional one the public adored, and the calculating one that worked tirelessly behind the scenes to secure opportunities most actors wouldn't even know about. And that duality made her unpredictable. Now let's pause for a moment. Why does unpredictability matter on a show like Suits? Because television isn't just about acting. It's about reliability. Schedules are tight. Scripts are balanced. Everyone depends on everyone else showing up, delivering lines, and keeping the machine running. When one actor starts bending the rules, the ripple effect is enormous. And Meghan wasn't just bending rules, she was rewriting them. Producers began taking notes. Patterns emerged. Meghan's special requests always aligned with certain high-profile events. Yacht parties linked to businessmen with global influence. Fashion galas attended by billionaires and aristocrats. Conferences where the guest lists looked more like elite power summits than entertainment mixers. And each time, Meghan was there, smiling, posing, building connections. For the Suits team, this was alarming. Because suddenly, Suits wasn't the story anymore, Meghan was. She was overshadowing the show itself. And for a producer like Aaron Korsh, that was a problem. A very big problem. Remember, producers aren't just storytellers. They're protectors. Protectors of a brand, of a network investment, of a reputation. Korsh knew that if Meghan's extracurricular activities blew up in the press, it wouldn't just be her reputation on the line. It would be Suits. And the network wouldn't forgive him if their golden drama became tainted by scandal. So Korsh did what producers do. He began watching. Closely, he noticed the inconsistencies. The perfectly timed excuses. The way Meghan's personal schedule seemed to dictate production rather than the other way around. And though he stayed quiet publicly, behind the scenes he began to question, was Meghan truly committed to the show, or was she using it? And then came the breaking point. A major promotional event for Suits was scheduled. The network poured money into it. Cast members cleared their schedules. It was meant to be a unifying moment, showcasing the strength of the ensemble. But Meghan wasn't fully present. Insiders say her attention was divided, because she was simultaneously lining up a private appearance elsewhere. The kind of event that had nothing to do with Suits, but everything to do with advancing her off-screen connections. When word of this leaked back to the producers, tempers flared. This wasn't just unprofessional, it was dangerous. If sponsors realized their money was indirectly supporting Meghan's private ambitions, it could create chaos. If tabloids connected the dots, the headlines could be catastrophic. And Korsh, he found himself at a crossroads. He could confront Meghan directly, risk a blow-up, and potentially lose one of his cast members. Or he could begin preparing the quiet exit that would protect the show while avoiding public scandal. Which path do you think he chose? Because from that moment on, Meghan's time on Suits had an expiration date. And when the hammer finally fell, it wasn't about acting, it wasn't about storylines. It was about protecting Suits from the shadow Meghan herself was casting. But here's the twist. Meghan didn't go quietly. She fought. She negotiated. She believed she could still play both games. But Korsh had already decided. And the forces behind the scenes had already moved against her. What came next wasn't just a Hollywood decision. It was the first step in dismantling Meghan Markle's carefully crafted double life. And the way they did it? Nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming. That was the point. Meghan's departure from Suits had to look clean, polished, and completely free of controversy. To the outside world, it would appear like a natural evolution. A character's storyline wrapped up. A love interest tied with a bow. A graceful farewell. But behind the camera, the truth was far more brutal. Let's start here. Have you ever wondered why Meghan's exit felt so neat? Rachel Zane's character arc concluded with marriage, closure, and a happy ending. It was almost too perfect, as though it had been crafted to silence any suspicion. But why would producers bend over backwards to make sure her departure appeared flawless? Was it loyalty? Gratitude? Or was it strategy, an elaborate cover to hide the real reason she was leaving? Insiders say it was the latter, and the decision didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, like pressure in a boiler. Aaron Korsh and his team knew Meghan had to go, but they also knew they couldn't make it look like punishment. If Meghan was forced out publicly, the backlash could destroy the show. Fans adored Rachel Zane. Meghan had a loyal following. If the truth leaked, that her extracurricular life was threatening the integrity of Suits, the fallout would be devastating. So what did they do? They masked the exit as a triumph. It's almost ironic. The very skills Meghan allegedly used in her personal life, crafting illusions, playing roles, telling the story she wanted people to believe, were now being turned against her. The producers staged her exit like a fairy tale. A wedding. Happiness. Closure. Fans wept. Media outlets celebrated. Everyone thought Meghan had chosen to walk away gracefully. But behind the scenes, she had been shown the door. And that's where the contradictions get chilling. Publicly, Meghan's exit was spun as her decision. A young actress ready to move on, to explore other opportunities, to prepare for the next chapter of her life. Privately, the whispers say it was anything but voluntary. She was pushed. Quietly, strategically, and permanently. Why so quietly? Because Korsh wasn't just protecting Suits. He was protecting Meghan too. At least on the surface. By giving her a golden send-off, he made sure the yacht girl rumors, the odd absences, the whispered side deals, never made the press. He covered her tracks.
Imagine holding the world's most glamorous
he also
job
covered
title.
his own. Because if
Duchess
word
of
got out that
Sussex,
Korsh had allowed
married into
such
centuries
behavior
of
to happen
tradition,
unchecked,
adored,
the blame would
or
land on his
scrutinized
shoulders.
by millions,
But here's the kicker.
and then
Meghan
casually
didn't
admitting
leave
you never
empty-handed.
wanted it.
Those
That's
years
exactly
on
what
Suits had
Meghan
given her
Markle,
exactly
now
what she wanted.
44, has
Visibility,
finally done.
connections,
In a revelation that
access.
has sent
By the time
shockwaves
she
through
filmed
both
her final
Hollywood
scenes,
and Buckingham
she
Palace,
wasn't just an actress
Meghan
anymore.
confessed something
She was
many royal
already
watchers
negotiating
always
the next
suspected
chapter.
but never heard confirmed.
One that would make her Suits
I never
years
truly
look like a
wanted
warm-up.
royal life.
One that involved
I never
Prince Harry,
intended to commit
palaces,
to the
and
monarchy.
power beyond
From the
Hollywood's
start,
reach.
I
Now
saw my
ask yourself,
platform as a
did
launch
Meghan
pad to
orchestrate this timing?
independence.
Or
It's
was
the
it
kind of
sheer
confession that
coincidence
makes
that
you
her
pause
royal
mid-scroll,
romance blossomed
spill your
just as her
coffee,
Suits career
and wonder,
came to
wait,
an end?
did she
Fans
just say
believed it
that
was
out
destiny.
loud?
A
This
love
is
story
not
written
just
in the
gossip.
stars.
It's a
But what if it
turning
was
point in the
calculated?
entire
What
saga
if
of
Meghan
Prince
had already
Harry and Meghan
realized
Markle.
Suits had served
And
its
as we
purpose?
dive deep,
And when Korsh
you'll
closed
discover
the door,
why this
she
admission
simply
is more
stepped
than
through
just
another one.
personal honesty.
Think about it.
It's a
Meghan's
puzzle piece
character
that
left
reshapes
Suits
the
married,
story of Megxit,
secure, and loved.
Hollywood ambition,
And almost immediately
and what it means
after,
to live
Meghan
under the
woman
world's
stepped
brightest
into a
spotlight.
real-life
But
fairy
here's the
tale
real
engagement.
question.
The
If
overlap
Meghan
is
never
uncanny.
wanted royal life,
Was it fate?
what did she want
Or was
instead?
it the greatest
Let's
PR
break
pivot
it down.
Hollywood has ever seen?
Chapter 1.
For Aaron Korsh,
From Suits
though,
to the Palace,
this wasn't a love
the fairy
story.
tale that
It was
wasn't.
damage control.
Before tiaras,
He had to save his
curtsies,
show,
and
protect
royal
his cast,
tours,
and shield the
Meghan
sponsors.
Markle was an actress
Meghan's exit was
hustling
the
in
price.
Hollywood.
And though
Remember
the
her
public
role
narrative
as Rachel
painted her
Zane
as
in
the
Suits?
actress who left
Smart,
to chase
witty,
love,
glamorous,
the private reality
but
was
relatable.
harsher.
She wasn't
had
just
become
acting.
a liability.
She was
But
building a
liability
brand.
doesn't vanish.
Meghan already
It
ran a
lingers.
lifestyle
Because
blog,
even after
The Tig,
Meghan's exit,
partnered
the
with
rumors
fashion
didn't
brands,
die. They
and
followed
cultivated the
her into
influencer-style
Hollywood,
independence
into
that
London,
thrives
into
in
the
modern
palace
celebrity
walls,
culture.
the yacht
So when she met
whispers,
Prince
the
Harry,
networking allegations,
many assumed
the
she'd trade
calculated
all that for
appearances,
royal life.
they all
But did she
resurfaced.
ever truly
And that's
see
why
it as a
Korsh's
dream
silence
come
for
true?
years is so
Or was
telling.
the palace
He had
just
every
another
chance
stage?
to deny the speculation,
Bigger, brighter,
to
and
defend
global?
Meghan, to
Could it
insist
be
her
that
exit
Meghan
was
always
purely
saw
artistic.
royal life as
But he didn't.
temporary?
He stayed
A
silent.
bridge,
And silence,
not a destination?
in Hollywood,
Chapter
often
2,
says more than
the
words.
royal reality
Now
check.
here's where it gets
At
even
first
more
glance,
unsettling.
marrying into
When
the royal
Korsh finally
family
did
sounds like
speak,
the ultimate
he hinted
upgrade.
at what had been buried
Castles,
for years,
carriages,
that Meghan's
titles,
Suits
the stuff
story
of fairy
wasn't
tales.
just about acting,
But behind
but
closed
about
doors,
strategy.
the
About
monarchy
using
is
the
less
show as
Disney
cover for
princess
something
and more
else.
corporate
That's
boardroom.
not just scandalous,
Endless rules,
it's damning.
silent
Because if
smiles,
that's true, then
restrictive
Suits
press
wasn't Meghan's
protocols,
career. It
and
was her
worst of all,
camouflage.
A
But
public that
camouflage
can
only
turn
works
from
if nobody
adoration
sees
to
the
outrage
cracks.
overnight.
And Meghan's
By
cracks
Meghan's
were
own
already
words,
showing. Her
she felt
co-stars saw them.
silenced.
Crew members noticed
Even
them.
her wardrobe
Producers
choices
tracked them.
became statements.
Everyone knew, but
Neutral
nobody
tones.
spoke.
No
Not until
nail
now.
polish
So
beyond
what
pale
exactly
pink.
was happening during those
Hairstyles
years on
scrutinized
Suits that
like
forced
breaking
Korsh's
news.
hand?
For
What
someone who
patterns
had
were
built
so
her identity
undeniable
around
that even a
self-expression
carefully
and
crafted
independence,
cover-up couldn't
was this
hide them
ever
forever?
sustainable?
Because here's
Chapter
the twist.
3.
Meghan's exit
Planting
may
the
have
seeds
looked
of
clean,
exit.
but
What's
behind the
fascinating
scenes,
is
her
that
choices
Meghan's
left
recent
scars.
admission connects
Scars on
dots
the
we
cast.
ignored.
Scars
From the
on the
very
producers.
beginning,
Scars
there were
on a
subtle
show that had to
signs she was
quietly
never
rewrite
planning to be a
itself just to
lifer
protect
in the
its
firm.
survival.
Ending
And
her
when those
blog and
scars
social
began
media
to bleed
accounts
into
felt
public
more like
view
a
years
forced
later,
retreat than
they
a joyful
revealed
transition.
something shocking.
The tension
Something
with British
Korsh had tried to
tabloids
bury,
wasn't just
but
about
could no longer
coverage.
contain.
It was
Something that
about
tied
control.
Meghan's Suits years
Meghan
directly
often
to the
slipped
yacht girl
references in
allegations that would
interviews
haunt her
about wanting
forever.
her own
And what
voice.
that revelation
So was Megxit a
exposed,
shocking rupture?
nobody, not
Or
even
the
Meghan,
inevitable
could have
climax of a
prepared
plan
for.
that started the day
What
she said,
revelation
"I
tied
do"?
Meghan's Suits
Chapter
years
4,
directly
Hollywood
to the
Calling.
yacht girl allegations?
Fast forward to today.
It wasn't a dramatic
Meghan
expose
and Harry
in a
live in
tabloid.
Montecito,
It wasn't a
surrounded
leaked
by
video or a
A-listers,
sudden scandalous
production
headline.
deals,
No,
and brand
what cracked the
opportunities.
carefully built
Netflix
facade was far
documentaries,
subtler. A leaked
Spotify
email,
podcasts,
a message
Hollywood
exchange
premieres,
between event
and now
coordinators that
Meghan's
mentioned
confession
Meghan's
makes
name
sense.
in a context
She didn't
Suits
just
producers
leave the
could not
monarchy.
ignore.
She
Imagine
traded it.
this.
The
You're
crown
Aaron
was
Korsh.
never the prize.
You're
The
managing a hit
platform
show,
was.
balancing
In Hollywood,
budgets, pleasing
Meghan can tell her
sponsors,
story
keeping a
unfiltered,
cast happy.
where
And
what she
then,
wants,
out of nowhere,
monetize her
you're
name,
shown a piece
and
of
build an
correspondence
empire without
linking one of
asking
your
permission
actresses,
from courtiers.
not to a brand
But here's the
collaboration,
catch.
not to a
Does
charity
freedom feel
partnership,
sweeter when
but
it's
to a
won
private
through
gathering
controversy?
aboard a
Chapter
luxury
5,
yacht
the we
hosted
all
by figures
suspected
known
factor.
for blurring the
Why
lines
is the
between
world
networking
buzzing over
and
this
exploitation.
confession?
That's
Because
not
deep
just
down,
troubling.
we all
That's
suspected it.
catastrophic.
Every
Now
awkward
pause and
royal
think.
outing,
Why would
every
Meghan Markle,
frosty
a
balcony
mid-level
appearance,
TV actress,
every
be
leaked
mentioned
rumor
in an
about
email
staff
like
tension.
that? Was
They
it
were
casual
puzzle
name
pieces
dropping,
pointing
a
to the same
misunderstanding?
truth.
Or was it
Meghan
evidence
never
that her
looked at
offset
Windsor
life
Castle
was
with
beginning
stars
to
in her
merge
eyes?
dangerously with her
Instead,
professional one?
her gaze
For
always
Korsh,
seemed to
the
wander
answer didn't
west,
matter.
to
What
Los
mattered was the
Angeles,
risk.
to the
If that
cameras,
email got out,
to the world
if the
she
press
left
connected
behind but
Meghan
never
Markle,
abandoned
the
in
face
spirit.
of Rachel Zane,
Is it wrong
the
to
sweetheart
pursue
of Suits,
independence?
to those kinds
Or
of
is it
gatherings,
wrong to
the
marry
show's
into a
image would
centuries-old
crumble.
institution
Sponsors would
knowing
pull
you'll
out.
never stay?
Fans would turn.
Chapter 6,
Suits would be tainted
Harry's
forever.
role in the
And
plan.
here's the cruel
Now
irony.
here's where it
Suits
gets
was a
even
show about
messier.
law,
If
deception,
Meghan never wanted
hidden
royal
agendas.
life, what about
Now,
Prince Harry?
its own cast
By
member
his
was
own
allegedly
admission,
living a parallel
Harry
scandal.
struggled with royal
Life imitating
expectations
art,
long before
art
Meghan.
reflecting life.
In many
But in
ways,
this case,
she gave
the
him the
stakes weren't
courage
just
to act
ratings,
on feelings
they were
he already had.
reputations.
But
So
critics
Korsh acted.
ask,
Meetings
did
were called.
Meghan manipulate Harry
Executives
into
debated.
leaving?
The
Or did
email
she
was
simply
kept quiet,
accelerate a
buried
decision
deep.
he wanted anyway?
NDAs may have been
Is
whispered
Meghan the
about,
mastermind
but
of
one
Megxit,
conclusion was
or
unavoidable.
Harry's partner
Meghan
in
had to go.
liberation?
Let's
Chapter
rewind, though,
7.
because
The
this wasn't the
monarchy
first
reacts.
time Meghan's
If
name
Buckingham
had been tied
Palace
to
ever
questionable
felt
circles.
blindsided by Megxit,
Long before Prince
Meghan's
Harry,
confession
long
must
before the
sting
royal
even
wedding,
more.
whispers
Because if
of
she
yacht
never
girl
intended to stay,
associations had
then her
floated
marriage
around.
to Harry represents
Hollywood
more than
insiders
just
heard them.
romance.
Crew
It
members
looks
joked
to
about
some
them.
like a tactical
Tabloids had
move.
hints, but
Courtiers
no proof.
once
And
whispered
Meghan,
about
savvy
modernizing
as
the
ever,
monarchy.
denied,
Meghan's brand
deflected,
power could have
and
been an
carefully
asset,
built her public
but
image
instead,
as the
her
humanitarian,
exit left
the
the
actress,
institution
the
bruised
outsider
and
breaking
scrambling.
barriers.
Now the
But
royal
behind the
family
curtain,
faces a
the
PR
stories
nightmare.
persisted. And
How
here's
do you
where the
rebuild
contradiction
trust with a
sharpens
public
again.
that feels
Meghan
deceived?
played Rachel
Chapter
Zane,
8.
a character who
Hollywood's
demanded
win,
respect,
the crown's
who worked
loss.
tirelessly to
From
be
a branding
seen as more than
perspective,
just a pretty
Meghan's
face in a law
independence is a
firm.
masterclass
Yet in real
in career
life, critics
reinvention.
argued
She
was doing
transformed
the
from
opposite,
TV actress
leaning
to
into
global
connections,
headline.
appearances,
She leveraged
and
royal
networks
fame
that had little
into
to do with
multimillion-dollar
hard work
deals.
and
She
everything to do
secured
with
a legacy
opportunity.
for her
Was
children
Rachel Zane the
outside the
role
rigid
Meghan
system.
wanted to be?
But
While
what did the
Meghan
monarchy
herself was
lose
playing
in
an
return?
entirely
A
different
chance
game.
to modernize,
Ask yourself this.
diversify,
If those yacht
and
girl
embrace
allegations
a
weren't
global
true,
audience.
why did they
In
follow her
Hollywood
so
terms,
persistently?
it's the ultimate
Why did
trade-off.
producers feel
Meghan
threatened
got her
enough to
starring
bury
role,
evidence,
but the
smooth her
monarchy
exit,
lost its
and
breakout
rewrite
star.
storylines?
Chapter 9.
Why did Aaron Korsh,
The public
a man
divide.
known for sharp
Here's where
storytelling,
it gets juicy.
remained silent for years
Meghan's
rather
confession
than issue
doesn't
a
just
simple
explain
denial.
her journey.
Silence
It
protects,
reignites the
but
global
silence
debate.
also damns.
Supporters say
and here's where things get
she was
darker.
honest,
Allegedly,
brave,
the yacht
and
connections
chose happiness
weren't just
over
social.
duty.
They were
Critics say
transactional.
she
Opportunities
used the monarchy
exchanged
as
for
a ladder,
appearances.
then kicked it
Invitations
away.
traded for
The divide
visibility.
is sharper
A
than
system
ever.
that, in
But
Hollywood
isn't that Meghan's
has been
brand
whispered
at its
about
core?
for decades.
Polarizing,
Meghan wasn't the first
bold,
to be linked to it.
unapologetic.
She won't be the last.
Love her or
But
hate
she is
her,
one of
you
the
can't
few who
ignore her.
managed to climb out
Chapter
of it,
10,
using Suits
Lessons
as the
for the
launchpad.
rest of us.
The timing
Okay,
is almost
let's
too
pause
perfect.
the royal drama
Meghan
and
leaves
make this
Suits with a
personal.
polished storyline.
What can we learn
Weeks
from
later,
Meghan's confession?
headlines emerge about her
Authenticity
romance
matters.
with Prince Harry.
Living a
Suddenly,
life that
the
doesn't
yacht
align
rumors
with
are
your values
irrelevant,
will eventually
buried
crack.
under the glow of
Every
royal
choice has
engagement.
trade-offs.
The narrative shifts.
Meghan gained
The
freedom
world
but
forgets,
lost tradition.
or at least
The monarchy
pretends
lost
to.
her
But
charisma
Aaron
but
Korsh
kept
didn't
its
forget.
rules.
He
Your
couldn't,
voice is your
because
power.
he was the one who
Meghan
carried the
didn't
weight of
thrive
protecting
until she
Suits, while
reclaimed
letting
hers.
Meghan's carefully
And maybe that's
staged
the real
exit
reason her
distract the public
confession
from the real
resonates.
story. And
It's
now,
not just about
at
crowns
58,
and castles.
Korsh has finally
It's about
hinted
the
at
universal
truth.
struggle
He
to
didn't need to
live
name
authentically,
the yachts, the parties,
even when the world
hosts.
expects
He
something
only
else.
needed to admit
Chapter
that Meghan's
11,
departure wasn't
the aha
entirely
moment.
clean.
Think
That there
about
were
it.
complications
How many of us
outside
stay
the
in
show.
jobs,
Complications
relationships, or
Suits could
roles
not
because
afford.
they look good on
And
paper,
with that, the dominoes
while secretly
fall.
dreaming
Think
of
about the
something else?
impact of those
Meghan's
words.
story is extreme,
Complications.
sure.
It's vague.
Most of us aren't
It's careful,
dining with
but
kings
it's
or
also
walking
damning.
red carpets.
Because in Hollywood,
But her journey
when
reflects the
producers use
truth
words
we all
like that,
wrestle with.
it usually
Are you
means
living the
scandals
life you
hidden,
want,
reputations
or the life
protected,
others
deals
expect of
made
you?
in shadows.
That's the aha
So
moment.
where does that leave Meghan
Chapter
now?
12.
Her Hollywood
What's
career
next
gone.
for Meghan?
Her royal
Now
life
that she's
fractured.
openly admitted
Her
she never
brand under
wanted royal
scrutiny.
life,
And
what's
now,
next for
her
Meghan
Suits
Markle?
years,
A
the
return
one
to
chapter she
acting,
could always
expanding
point to
her
as her big
production
break,
empire,
are being re-examined
politics,
under a harsh
philanthropy,
new light.
or maybe even a
Fans who once
presidential
adored
run.
Rachel Zane
One
are
thing is
now
certain.
wondering, was
She's
Meghan
not
ever
slowing
really
down.
playing Rachel?
In fact,
Or was she
this
always
confession
playing
feels
Meghan,
less like
the woman
closure
who
and
knew
more
how
like
to
a
use
prologue?
every stage to reach
Conclusion.
the next one?
The confession
Yacht Girl
heard
rumors
around
may
the
have been
world.
buried once.
At 44,
But with Korsh's
Meghan
words,
Markle has pulled
they've
back the
clawed their way
curtain
back
and
to the
admitted what we all
surface.
suspected.
And this time, they're
She
stronger.
never wanted royal
Because
life.
if Meghan's
It's
Suits
shocking.
exit was
It's
truly linked
controversial.
to those connections,
But it's also
then her
refreshingly
entire career
human.
trajectory
Because who
looks
among
less
us
like a
hasn't
fairy
chosen
tale,
independence
and more like
over
a carefully
expectation,
constructed illusion,
even at a
and the
cost?
next revelation
So
waiting
whether
in the
you see
shadows,
Meghan as a
that's the
heroine
one
or strategist,
even Meghan's sharpest
one truth
strategies
remains.
may not be able to contain.
She's living on her own
the next
terms.
revelation
And
waiting
maybe
in the
that's
shadows,
the ultimate crown.
it came not from
Call to
tabloids
action.
or gossip blogs,
Now it's your
but
turn.
from the people who
What
had
do
been
you think
closest
about
to Meghan
Meghan's
during her
confession?
Suits years.
Was she
the
brave
cast
for
and crew
admitting the
themselves.
truth?
And their
Or was it
silence,
unfair
once
to the
protective,
monarchy from the
began
start?
to crack.
Share your
Here's the
thoughts
question.
below. Debate,
Why would actors and
disagree,
staff who once
or
worked
defend?
alongside Meghan
Just don't stay
laughed
silent.
with her between takes,
And if this deep
even
dive gave you a
defended her in
fresh
interviews,
perspective,
suddenly
share
start
it with a
distancing
friend who
themselves?
can't resist
Why,
royal drama.
when the topic
Because
of
the
Meghan
story
arises
isn't
now,
over yet.
do so many
It's only getting
co-stars speak
started.
in vague terms, offering polite but hollow words, never diving deep? Because they know, they saw, and even if they won't say it outright, the way they tiptoe around the subject screams volumes. Think about it. In Hollywood, actors are quick to gush about their former colleagues. When a star makes it big, their co-stars usually ride the wave, telling stories, praising their talent, reminding the world, I knew them when. But with Meghan, the enthusiasm is missing. No glowing anecdotes. No, she deserves everything she's achieved. Just carefully measured responses. Why? Because what they witnessed on set doesn't match the public fairy tale. One former crew member allegedly described Meghan as two different people. On camera, the charming professional. Off camera, the strategist. Every handshake, every smile, every interaction calculated. And while some admired her ambition, others found it unsettling. She wasn't there to be part of the Suits family. She was there to use Suits as a stepping stone, and everyone felt it. But here's the twist. That stepping stone wasn't just about fame. It was about access. Access to people, places, and circles that had nothing to do with television. And the way she navigated that access was what made producers nervous. Now, let me ask you directly. Have you ever known someone who seemed to live a double life? The coworker who seems ordinary in the office, but has a completely different persona after hours? That was Meghan. Except her after-hours life wasn't ordinary at all. It was glittering, extravagant, and filled with people whose names were whispered with both awe and suspicion. Aaron Korsh and the producers saw the contradictions. They heard about the yacht parties. They noticed the unexplained trips. They connected the dots between Meghan's personal opportunities and her professional commitments. And while they couldn't always prove the rumors, the smoke was undeniable. And where there's smoke, there's usually fire. The crew, too, began piecing it together. Small things. Meghan's wardrobe requests that seemed more about red carpets than courtroom scenes. The way photographers always seemed to know where she'd be, even at low-key events. The uncanny ability to pivot conversations toward her own projects, during interviews that were supposed to be about Suits. All minor on their own, but together, they painted a picture. And then came the resentment. Her co-stars worked just as hard, sometimes harder, but they didn't get the same treatment. They didn't get the time off for special commitments. They didn't get invited to the glamorous parties or featured in glossy spreads. Meghan was being elevated beyond her role, and everyone knew it wasn't because of Suits alone. The tension grew. Whispers behind closed doors turned into eye rolls on set. And Korsh, he had a cast to manage, a crew to protect, a network breathing down his neck. How long could he let one actress dominate the conversation? Not because of her performance, but because of the drama trailing her like a shadow. The final straw, insiders claim, came when Meghan's side activities began clashing directly with Suits' schedule. Scenes delayed, scripts adjusted, entire days reshuffled to accommodate her. For Korsh, this wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. It threatened the rhythm of the entire production. That's when he made the call. Meghan's character had to be written out, but not abruptly, not harshly, with grace, with polish, with enough sugarcoating to convince fans it was her choice. And that's how Rachel Zane's wedding storyline was born. But here's the chilling irony. While Rachel Zane was walking down the aisle on television, Meghan Markle was preparing to walk down a very different aisle in real life. The Suits farewell doubled as a rehearsal for her royal wedding. Life and fiction blurred so seamlessly that most viewers never suspected a thing. Now, years later, Korsh finally admits what was really happening. Meghan wasn't just leaving because of love or royalty. She was leaving because the show couldn't risk her staying. And that's the bombshell, because it means her entire Hollywood narrative was rewritten to hide the truth. Fans mourned Rachel Zane's exit. They cheered Meghan's new chapter. They thought they were watching destiny unfold. But behind the curtain, they were watching damage control in action. So here's the question that should keep you awake. If Suits went to such lengths to cover Meghan's exit, what else have we been shielded from? What other chapters in her story have been rewritten to protect her image? Because if the producers could hide this, imagine what the palace, the press, and Meghan herself have buried since. And the next piece of that puzzle? It would come from Korsh himself, when he finally broke his silence. And the words he chose shocked everyone. When Aaron Korsh finally broke his silence, he didn't sit down with flashing cameras or an explosive magazine interview. No, his words slipped out more carefully, almost casually, but that's what made them even more devastating. He didn't name Meghan directly as a scandal. He didn't throw accusations. Instead, he dropped subtle, loaded phrases. Words like complicated, issues beyond the show, and difficult circumstances. Now pause for a second. What do those words really mean in Hollywood? They're the coded language of damage control. When a producer says an actor left because of creative differences, it usually means the actor was a nightmare to work with. When they mention personal reasons, it often hides addiction, affairs, or chaos. And when Korsh said Meghan's departure came with complications, that was the quiet confession fans weren't supposed to catch. But people caught it. Because think about it. If Meghan's exit was as clean and innocent as the fairy tale claimed, Korsh could have just said so. He could have said, "She left to get married, and we were thrilled for her. End of story." But he didn't. Instead, he left cracks in the narrative. And through those cracks, the truth started leaking. Insiders whispered that Korsh had been sitting on this for years. That NDAs, legal pressure, and the sheer weight of Meghan's royal status kept him silent. After all, who dares to challenge a duchess? Who dares to say, actually, she didn't walk away for love. She was pushed out to protect us all from the shadows she carried? But at 58, Korsh clearly decided he had nothing left to lose. His career established, his legacy secure, he no longer needed to protect Meghan or himself. And so the truth, long buried, began to seep out. And what truth was that? That Meghan's time on Suits was marred not by her talent, not by her acting, but by what she did off camera. That the yacht girl whispers, the side deals, the strange appearances were not just idle gossip, but a real concern for the people running the show. That the producers had to make a choice, protect one actress or protect an entire franchise. And Korsh chose the franchise. Now here's where the contradiction bites deepest. Meghan, in her interviews, has always painted Suits as her family, her safe space, the place where she belonged before the chaos of royal life. But Korsh's words challenged that narrative. If Suits was truly her family, why did that family feel forced to remove her quietly? Why did they write her out while pretending it was her decision? Why did they mask their relief with smiles? The answer is simple. Families protect each other. But Suits had to protect itself from Meghan. And that revelation cuts deeper than any tabloid rumor. Because it means Meghan's fairy tale departure wasn't her triumph. It was her containment. She wasn't the golden star leaving on her own terms. She was the liability quietly shown the door, given a pretty storyline, so the audience wouldn't ask questions. But Korsh's confession does more than rewrite Meghan's Suits history. It reshapes her entire narrative. Because if she was using Suits as cover for connections, if her exit was really about scandal, then what does that say about the years that followed? About her sudden leap into royal life? About the whirlwind romance that conveniently overlapped with her career's abrupt end? Coincidence or choreography? Because here's a thought that should make you shiver. What if Meghan's Suits exit wasn't just about closing one chapter? What if it was the calculated beginning of the next? Suits gave her the visibility, the access, the polish. And when that door was closing, another one was already opening. A prince, a palace, a crown. And now, with Korsh's words, the illusion shatters. Meghan didn't just walk out of Suits into Harry's arms. She was pushed out of Suits, and in that push, she landed into the opportunity she'd been curating all along. If Suits covered for Meghan, if Korsh kept quiet to protect her and the show, then who else has covered for her since? Who else has rewritten her story to keep the fairy tale alive? And what happens if they stop? Because Korsh was only the first to speak. Others, perhaps, are waiting. And if their silence breaks too, Meghan's carefully crafted narrative could unravel completely. And what's buried under those layers of illusion? That's the part Meghan fears most. If Korsh was only the first to let the mask slip, then the real danger for Meghan was never the producers. It was the domino effect. Once one person cracks the silence, others begin to feel less restrained. And that's when the whispers snowball into a roar. Here's the chilling part. The Suits cast and crew had stories. Everyone knew it. But they kept them tucked away, hidden under professional courtesy and ironclad contracts. They played along with the narrative of Meghan's fairy tale departure because it protected them, the show, and the network. Yet when Korsh cracked that door open, he sent a signal. Silence was no longer mandatory. So what happens when silence breaks? Take a look at the way her co-stars react when asked about Meghan today. It's subtle, but it's telling. They don't gush. They don't reminisce about how warm and family-like she was. They use vague platitudes. She was professional. We wish her the best. And then quickly change the subject. That's not how you talk about someone you adored. That's how you talk about someone you're avoiding. Why avoid? Because they all lived through it. They saw the side of Meghan the audience never did. The late-night negotiations. The carefully engineered press stunts. The calculated friendships. And yes, the whispers about those yacht girl appearances. Now, let me ask you this. If even her fellow actors were suspicious, what must the producers have been dealing with behind the scenes? Insiders suggest the tension reached a boiling point during Meghan's last season. Entire scenes had to be rewritten to work around her schedule. Dialogue trimmed, filming dates shifted. She wasn't the lead, yet somehow the show bent itself to accommodate her. For Korsh, who valued structure and discipline, this wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. Because Suits wasn't supposed to be Meghan's personal platform. It was supposed to be his legacy. And legacy is everything in Hollywood. So, when Korsh hinted at complications, what he really revealed was that Meghan's ambition had clashed head-on with his legacy. He couldn't let one actress endanger everything he had built. That's why the wedding storyline was crafted so carefully. It wasn't a gift to Meghan. It was insurance for Korsh. By giving her a picture-perfect send-off, he protected Suits from backlash while quietly cutting out the tumor before it spread. But here's the cruel irony. The very thing that was meant to silence questions, the neat Rachel Zane farewell, has now become fuel for suspicion. Fans are revisiting those episodes, watching them with new eyes. The symmetry between Rachel's wedding and Meghan's real-life engagement to Harry is almost too convenient. Was it life imitating art, or art being manipulated to disguise life? Because consider this, Meghan's final scenes aired just months before her royal engagement. Timing like that doesn't happen by chance. Was the storyline adjusted to align with her personal agenda? Or did she engineer her personal life to align with her exit? Either way, it reeks of calculation. And here's the haunting question. If Meghan was allegedly using Suits events as cover for Yacht Girl connections, was her departure the moment the cover became unnecessary? Suits gave her access, visibility, and a legitimate excuse to travel in elite circles. But once Prince Harry entered the picture, she no longer needed the show. She had found a new stage, one grander, more powerful, more dangerous. For Korsh, that was both a relief and a warning. Relief, because the Meghan problem was solved. Warning, because he knew exactly what kind of game she was capable of playing. He had witnessed it firsthand. And when he finally spoke, decades later, his words carried the weight of someone who had watched a master manipulator at work. But here's what nobody saw coming. Korsh's confession didn't just shine a light on Meghan's past. It reignited all the rumors she had spent years trying to bury. Suddenly, the Yacht Girl whispers weren't just internet gossip. They were part of a larger narrative. A narrative in which Meghan's Suits career was never about acting, but about strategy. So the question becomes, if Meghan was using Suits as a launchpad, how far back does the calculation go? Was her relationship with Prince Harry just another chapter in the same script? Was her exit from Suits the closing act of one story and the opening act of another? Because if the patterns are real, if Meghan has always been playing a larger game, then the royal family wasn't her fairy tale. It was her ultimate stage. If Aaron Korsh finally dared to speak, who's next? Which co-star will break their silence? Which crew member will leak the stories they've been holding for years? And when they do, will Meghan's carefully crafted image survive the avalanche? Because if even one more domino falls, the entire illusion could collapse. What happens when the illusion starts to collapse? The answer is simple. The very machine that once protected Meghan begins to turn on her. You see, Hollywood has one ironclad rule. When someone is valuable, they're untouchable. But once their value slips, once the shine wears off, the stories that were buried start to crawl back out. And with Meghan, those stories aren't just embarrassing, they're explosive. Let's rewind to those final months on Suits. To the public, Meghan was glowing. She was dating a prince. Her career looked solid, and her character was heading toward a fairy tale wedding on screen. But behind closed doors, Korsh and the network were fighting a battle. Scripts had to be changed to accommodate Meghan's schedule. Entire shooting days were lost because she was away at events that seemed more about cultivating her brand than promoting the show. Now imagine being one of her co-stars. You've been grinding through 14-hour days. You've memorized your lines, hit your marks, done your press tours. And yet, Meghan could slip away, bend the rules, and return with her reputation brighter than before. Wouldn't you resent it? Wouldn't you question how she kept pulling it off? Some did. In fact, whispers began that Meghan wasn't just bending rules, she was rewriting them. When her name started surfacing in those Yacht Girl rumors, when event coordinators and insiders quietly linked her to private gatherings that had nothing to do with Suits, the resentment turned into unease. Cast members didn't want to be dragged into that mess. Crew members didn't want to work under the shadow of scandal. Korsh couldn't risk headlines destroying his creation. And yet, Meghan was untouchable, or so it seemed. Because here's the twist. Meghan thought she had leverage. She believed her rising star, her outside connections, and eventually her relationship with Harry would shield her. She thought Korsh needed her more than she needed him. But Korsh knew something Meghan didn't. Every actor is replaceable. Every storyline can be rewritten. And every liability, no matter how shiny, can be cut loose. That's why her exit was staged so perfectly. The wedding send-off wasn't for Meghan, it was for Suits. It was to protect the show, protect the network, and protect Korsh's legacy. By wrapping her character in a neat bow, they erased the questions. Fans cried tears of joy instead of demanding answers. The world believed Meghan had walked away on her own terms. But here's the part nobody realized at the time. The Rachel Zane wedding wasn't just a storyline. It was a smokescreen. It allowed Meghan to leave with dignity while hiding the producer's desperation to cut ties. It was damage control disguised as celebration. And that smokescreen worked, at least for a while. Because almost immediately after her exit, Meghan's engagement to Harry dominated the headlines. The timing was uncanny. Too uncanny. One chapter closed, another opened, and the transition was so seamless the world barely blinked. But now, with Korsh's revelations, the illusion is cracking. Fans are looking back at her exit, asking, was that really a farewell or a cover-up? Was Meghan leaving Suits to marry a prince? Or was she forced out just in time to hide the storm closing in? Think about the irony. Meghan built her image on being the underdog, the outsider breaking barriers. But behind the scenes, she was allegedly the one bending rules, cutting deals, and leveraging access. She was never the underdog. She was the strategist. And Suits, whether it wanted to or not, became her launchpad. And here's the haunting question. If Korsh finally admitted that Meghan's departure came with complications, how many more complications have been buried since? How many stories about those yacht connections, those private parties, those questionable alliances were swept under the rug because Meghan became royalty? Because let's be real, the palace had every reason to protect her image. The royal family couldn't afford their new duchess being linked to yacht girl rumors or shady Hollywood whispers. So the cover-up continued. Suits had passed her on. Now the crown picked up the burden. But what happens when both Hollywood and royalty are done protecting you? That's where Meghan stands today. The networks that once covered for her are no longer invested. The palace that once shielded her has turned cold. And Aaron Korsh's subtle words at 58 were just the first stone thrown. Because once one person speaks, others follow. And when those voices rise, Meghan's carefully scripted narrative may not just unravel, it may explode. And the next voice ready to speak? That's the one Meghan fears most. And who is the next voice Meghan fears most? It isn't Aaron Korsh anymore. He's already played his hand. It isn't the tabloids. They've been spinning stories for years. No, the voice that could shake Meghan's foundation comes from within the very circle that once lifted her up, her castmates. Think about it. For years, they've remained carefully neutral. Polite words in interviews, stiff smiles when her name is mentioned, quick deflections when pressed for details. But silence like that isn't loyalty, it's self-preservation. They know things. They saw things. And sooner or later, one of them will break ranks. Why? Because silence is heavy. And because Meghan's shadow still follows them. Let's rewind to those final months again. Behind the perfect hair and the courtroom costumes, tension was boiling. Scenes had to be rearranged, filming days rescheduled, and lines rewritten. Why? To accommodate Meghan's increasingly erratic schedule. Her off-screen life kept colliding with her on-screen commitments. And her castmates noticed. Imagine sitting in a freezing Toronto studio, hours behind schedule, waiting on one actress who always seemed to have something more important than the show you were all hired to make. Imagine watching her glide back on a set as though nothing had happened, smiling for the cameras, while the rest of the cast carried the weight of her absence. Wouldn't you grow bitter? Wouldn't you keep those memories tucked away, ready to spill when the timing was right? And now the timing might be right. Because Korsh's confession gave them cover. If the creator of Suits could finally admit complications, then cast and crew can too. And the second one of them decides to tell their side, the dam will break. And here's the terrifying part for Meghan. What they might reveal could confirm the very rumors she has spent years trying to erase. The whispers about yacht girl appearances. The secretive absences. The way paparazzi always seemed to know where she'd be, even at supposedly private events. The overlap between Suits' filming schedules and her personal networking trips. It all connects. Now let's add another layer of irony. On screen, Rachel Zane was a woman desperate to prove herself, to be respected for her intellect and not dismissed as a pretty face. Yet behind the scenes, Meghan was allegedly doing the very opposite, trading visibility for access, appearances for influence. Was Rachel Zane the character Meghan wished people would believe she was, while Meghan the woman played a much colder, calculated role? The contrast is brutal. And that's why her co-star silence feels so sharp. They don't gush about her talent. They don't reminisce about fond memories. Instead, they skirt around the subject, carefully avoiding anything that might lock them into a lie. Because deep down, they know if one speaks, others will follow. And once those voices rise, Meghan's Suits narrative, her biggest professional achievement before Harry, crumbles into scandal. And make no mistake, Korsh knows this too. That's why his words were chosen so carefully. By saying complications, he didn't just protect himself, he sent a warning shot. He told the world, there's more here than you realize. And everyone who worked on that set understood exactly what he meant. So the question becomes, who will speak first? Will it be a co-star, tired of keeping the secret? Will it be a crew member who finally sells their story? Or will it be someone who attended those yacht-connected events, ready to link Meghan directly to the circles she's tried so hard to distance herself from? Because when that voice comes forward, Meghan won't be able to spin it as gossip. It won't be nameless sources. It will be someone who was there, someone who lived it, someone who has nothing left to lose. Once that happens, Meghan's royal dramas will look like child's play compared to what's unearthed from her Suits years. Because palace feuds are one thing. Hollywood scandals, yacht girl connections, those don't just damage reputations, they destroy them. And the world is waiting for the first domino to fall. Imagine it, the first domino falling. A single voice finally cracks the silence, and suddenly the carefully protected image Meghan built begins to tremble. Because once one story comes out, others can't help but follow. That's how scandals spread, not all at once, but in a chain reaction no one can stop. So what would that first revelation look like? It doesn't need to be a bombshell confession. It could be something small. A former castmate hinting in an interview that Meghan wasn't always as committed as others. A crew member dropping a cryptic line on social media about her mysterious absences. Or maybe, just maybe, an offhand comment about her outside commitments that had nothing to do with Suits. And here's where the danger lies for Meghan. Once those little cracks appear, the press pounces. Journalists, hungry for the story, will dig into her schedule. They'll match up Suits' filming calendars with yacht parties, galas, and elite gatherings. They'll pull receipts, photos, travel records. They'll expose the patterns Korsh and the producers tried so hard to bury. Ask yourself this. Why has Meghan's Suits story always been painted so clean, so polished? Because someone had to work overtime to keep it that way. Korsh did his part. The network played along. Even the cast held their tongues. But silence only lasts as long as everyone benefits. And today? With Meghan's reputation bruised, with her Hollywood deals under fire, with the royal family turning their backs, there's little incentive to keep protecting her. Now here's where it gets darker. The yacht girl whispers weren't just idle gossip in Hollywood circles. They were patterns. Patterns of appearances, invitations, and connections that aligned too neatly with her Suits schedule. Producers noticed. Crew members whispered. And now, years later, those same whispers are starting to resurface with a sharper edge. Imagine the fallout if even one co-star confirms the rumors. If someone admits Meghan's off-screen life was raising eyebrows during production. If someone reveals the producers discussed her behavior behind closed doors. That single confirmation would turn the whispers into fact. And Meghan's entire Suits legacy would collapse overnight. Because think about it, Suits wasn't just Meghan's career. It was her foundation. It was the credibility she carried into her royal life. Without Suits, Meghan wasn't Rachel Zhang. She wasn't the hard-working actress who caught the prince's eye. She was just another Hollywood name trying to make it. If Suits becomes tainted, then the entire fairy tale begins to look hollow. And here's the irony. Meghan's Suits exit was written as a wedding, a perfect happy ending. Yet in real life, it may have been a cover-up for a storm brewing beneath the surface. Fans thought they were watching closure, when in reality, they were watching damage control. Now, picture the scene. Meghan's critics seize on these revelations, pointing to the contradictions. Her supporters scramble to defend her, but the evidence piles up. Old photos, resurfaced travel records, insiders willing to talk for the first time. The press won't let go. The story shifts from royal drama to Hollywood scandal, and Meghan finds herself fighting battles on two fronts. And at the center of it all, Aaron Korsh's carefully chosen words. The spark that lit the fire. If Korsh was willing to drop hints, what else does he know? What stories has he still kept locked away, waiting for the right moment? And when those stories come out, will Meghan's entire public image survive? Or will it finally shatter under the weight of the truth? Because the silence is cracking, and the next revelation is always closer than anyone expects. What happens when silence shatters completely? When the cracks in Meghan's carefully managed image widen into a chasm too big to ignore. That's where the story gets dangerous. Because the very thing that made her rise possible, her talent for narrative control, becomes her greatest weakness once the truth slips beyond her grasp. Let's take a closer look at the pattern. Meghan's Suits years have always been wrapped in a bow, framed as her Hollywood breakthrough. The media told us she was a hardworking actress who carved her own way in a brutal industry. The show gave her credibility, legitimacy, visibility. But if Korsh's words are to be believed, if complications really masked scandal, then Suits wasn't her triumph. It was her shield, and shields eventually break. Picture it. The moment one insider goes on record, suddenly everyone who kept quiet has permission to speak. A domino effect. A former stylist remembers odd wardrobe requests meant for events outside Suits. A publicist recalls being told to spin last-minute absences. A co-star confesses that Meghan seemed always elsewhere, more interested in networking than filming. Each voice adds a piece, and together, the puzzle reveals a picture Meghan never wanted seen. Here's where the contradictions hit hardest. Meghan has always positioned herself as the outsider breaking barriers, the woman who had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously. But what if the truth is that she was playing a much different game? What if she wasn't climbing the ladder the hard way, but finding back doors, shortcuts, and side deals hidden in the shadows of Suits? Now think about the timing. Meghan's Suits exit lined up seamlessly with her entrance into royal life. Too seamlessly. Rachel Zane's wedding on screen flowed into Meghan Markle's engagement to Harry in real life. A fairy tale transition so neat it almost feels scripted. Was that fate? Or was it a strategy years in the making? Because ask yourself, how many people in history go from a supporting role on a cable drama to the gates of Buckingham Palace in the span of a year? That doesn't happen by accident. And Korsh's words cracked that timeline wide open. By admitting there were complications, he's admitting that Suits had become untenable, that Meghan's presence was no longer an asset but a liability. And if she was forced out of Suits, then her leap into royal life wasn't just romantic destiny. It was survival, a pivot from one stage to another, just in time to outrun the storm closing in behind her. But here's where it gets really unsettling. If Meghan used Suits as cover for networking, yacht appearances, and elite connections, then leaving the show didn't end the pattern. It elevated it. Suddenly, she had a prince, a title, a platform bigger than any TV series. The stakes were higher, the image more delicate, and the need for control absolute. The same strategy that once bent the rules on a set in Toronto was now playing out on a global scale. And that's why Korsh's confession is so dangerous for her. Because if the Suits narrative cracks, then people start questioning every chapter that followed. Did Meghan leave Hollywood for love? Or because she had to? Did she marry Harry out of passion? Or as the ultimate role in her lifelong script? The questions multiply, and each one chips away at the fairy tale. Now, think about the impact. Meghan's critics latch onto Korsh's words as proof they were right all along. Her supporters struggle to defend her, because how do you argue against the man who created the very show that launched her career? Suits was supposed to be her proudest achievement. Now it risks becoming Exhibit A in the case against her. If Korsh finally opened the door, what happens when someone swings it wide? When the co-star who rolled their eyes at her excuses, or the assistant who booked her mystery flights, finally decides to speak out? That's the revelation Meghan can't prepare for, the one she can't spin away. Because the next voice won't just expose her Suits years. It will expose the pattern that